COP29 President Mukhtar Babayev has warned that initiative to mitigate the effects of climate change could stall if governments refuse to compromise. He urged governments to deal with points of disagreement and conclude a deal on financing the energy transition in developing countries. Meanwhile, the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, Dion George, says he hopes that the G20 in Brazil will also discuss climate change as it affects developing countries. For more on this, we cross now to SABC News reporter Samkele Maseko. Very good afternoon to you, or whatever time it is there where you are, Samkele. Tell us more.
Well, indeed, NOMPU negotiations are ongoing. Various issues are being ventilated, but there is an issue on the adaptation, particularly from the developed nations against the developing nations on the financing of the adaptation. You also have the Minister, Dion George, who is chairing mitigation on all the mitigation measures that need to be put in place. There was an issue in the last COP of the Loss and Recovery Fund that has also not yet been finalized. But I'm going to bring in one individual who is a general manager of Just Transition at the power utility Eskom in South Africa, Dr. Rajpal, if I pronounced it correctly. Dr. Rajpal, just the lessons that you have learned as Eskom on the Just Transition, particularly using Komati Power Station as a case and example, knowing the findings of the Presidential Climate Commission as well on some of the issues that have taken place there in Komati.
Absolutely. We've seen the importance of sequencing, starting early with our planning and development. So we have taken a decision as an organization to decouple our station operations from our repurposing and repowering to ensure that we have a continuation of economic activity at our power stations as and when those power plants eventually do shut down. We've seen an importance of repurposing for economic diversification, because as we transition from high emitting sources towards lower carbon sources as such, and as we build more renewables, we see that there will be a loss in jobs across the province. It is something that we acknowledge. It's something that we need to address urgently and in partnership with all role players. So partnership is a key learning as well from the energy transition, that it is not Eskom's or the sole responsibility of Eskom, but all players that come together to ensure that we have a truly just transition. Many other aspects, importantly, the importance of social dialogue, taking communities along the journey with us, engaging them and co-creating opportunities with those communities, so that when we transition, or as we transition and as we find new opportunities for economic diversification, those communities are deeply involved in the transition and they understand the impact of power station shutdown, they understand the impact of the new energy direction as such, and that they can participate in it as well.
How far is the repurposing of Komati Power Station?
We have a number of initiatives. We've completed technical assessments for the solar PV plant, and we are currently in the market for an engineer procure construct contract that will assist us in final designs and constructing the PV plant. We are doing environmental assessments on the wind plant. And from a repurposing perspective, we have already established assembly lines for us to manufacture containerized microgrids. We've established training centers at Komati to assist us Eskom employees as well as community members in training in things like welding, solar mounting, solar PV that is, mounting and installation. We're in the process, we're quite advanced with the wind turbine technician course as well. And we've provided a number of opportunities and training courses for both community members, Eskom employees, as well as our contractors. In addition to that, we've established an agrivoltaics plant at Komati, and that will serve as a test and demonstration facility to assist us in guiding our energy transition. So as we build more renewables, specifically solar PV in Mpumalanga, we find ourselves competing with prime agricultural land, and agrivoltaics allows us to coexist as such. So while you're managing the energy landscape, you are also addressing the agricultural landscape as such. You're not competing with prime agricultural land. And importantly, by focusing on agriculture, it allows us to bring in women and youth into the process as such, because we know that the unemployment rate in Mpumalanga is far higher than the country's average. We know that we have high unemployment, specifically on the youth, And it is our intention to utilize our facilities and make our infrastructure available so that those that specialize in different aspects of the value chain can come through, utilize our infrastructure and assist us in addressing the socio-economic challenges that we have in the community and as well as the province as a whole.
Dr. Rajpal, when you look at this particular COP, it's largely a finance COP on mitigation measures, putting in those mitigation measures in place. Developing nations saying the developed nations promised $100 billion in order to deal with this just transition. Developing nations are saying they need now an additional $1.5 trillion per annum in order to navigate through the just transition phase. Can you see the developed nations forking out that particular tune of money?
It's difficult to see it pan out the way it is being described. It is something that we need to co-create, and it is importantly, we need to have a lot more grant funding, because as we see it now, there's a lot focus on concessional funding and a lot of focus on debt financing as well, but the focus needs to transition towards grant funding, especially when it comes to community-driven initiatives to allow us to address those community challenges that we have, which are largely historical.
The power utility, are you ready for this just transition, knowing very well the job losses that can be felt in the coal belt in Mpumalanga, mitigating it to the automotive sector, knowing that if the just transition does not happen and the more products have carbon in them in South Africa, they will be banned through the CBAN in the EU market, which will ultimately mean South Africa's automotive sector could lose their markets on this preserving of coal that South Africa is hell-bent on?
It comes down to partnerships. It largely depends on public-private partnerships, but importantly, there's a fourth element, or the fourth P, which is people, public-private-people partnerships. And as we transition, we need to ensure that it's not Eskom alone that has to bear the brunt of the transition. We need to work together with private participants as such, with those community members, to ensure that we can have a just transition.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rajpal. That is Dr. Rajpal, who is the General Manager of Just Transition at South Africa's power utility, Eskom, saying that it is not only their sole responsibility as the power utility for the country's just transition, it is a responsibility of all sectors involved, private, business, and also government.
Thanks very much. My colleague there, Samkele Maseko, reporting from Baku.